Good morning, children, and welcome back to this session of English class. So, children, today in this session we will study about the chapter Landscape of the Soul in detail by Nathalie Treveroy. Children, in the previous video I had discussed about Nathalie Treveroy and about the theme of the chapter. So, now let's study this chapter in detail. Before we move on to the chapter, let's study these expressions in the text and let's infer their meaning. So, first word is anecdote. So, anecdote means a short, amusing story. Delicate realism. It means careful treatment producing something very real like life. Figurative painting, it means painting showing people, animals and objects as they really look like. No masking is there. Exactly the way they are portrayed. Then illusionistic likeness. Illusion means something which is not true, but it appears to be true. Let me give you an example of illusion. Suppose you are moving on a highway in your car. So at a distance of about 500 to 700 meters, if the road is empty, you will feel that there is water on the road, but as you reach that place, nothing is there. That is illusion. This phenomena you might study in your physics class. So likeness means similarity. So if I talk about illusionistic likeness, it means something very real like life, but actually it is not true, and there is similarity between them. Then comes conceptual space. Conceptual space means, concept means which is not in practical, but it is only in theory. Theoretical. So space means something which is existing between the earth and the sky. So in conceptual space we talk like something which is there in between, the middle void. So now let's start with the chapter. Let me read this story. A wonderful old tale is about the painter Wu Daozi, who lived in the 8th century. His last painting was a landscape commissioned by the Tang Emperor Xuanzong to decorate a palace wall. The master had hidden his work behind a screen, so only the emperor would see it. For a long while, the emperor admired the wonderful scene, discovering forests, high mountains, waterfalls, clouds floating in an immense sky, men on hilly paths, birds in the flight. Look, sir, said the painter. In this cave at the foot of the mountain dwells a spirit. The painter clapped his hands and the entrance to the cave opened. The inside is splendid, beyond anything words can convey. Please let me show your majesty the way. The painter entered the cave, but the entrance closed behind him. And before the astonished emperor could move or utter a word, the painting had vanished from the wall. Not a trace of Wu Daoji's brush was left, and the artist was never seen again in this world. So children, in this story we are talking about a painter whose name was Wu Daoji, and the time period is about 8th century AD. So he was a painter in the court of Tang dynasty emperor, and his name was Xuanzong. So he ordered the painter to paint a landscape. Children, landscape, you understand, I think I have explained in the first video. It is related to painting, where we paint natural beauty. So he asked the painter to paint landscape to decorate a palace wall. So means painting had to be done on the palace wall. The master hid his work behind a screen. Master means the painter. He hid the work behind the screen, and only the emperor could see it. The emperor admired the wonderful scene. He found the forests, high mountains, waterfalls, clouds floating in the enormous sky, men on hilly paths, and birds in flight. Then the painter asked the king, and he asked generally in a respectful manner, to look into a cave at the foot of the mountain. And the painter said, "Sir, a spirit lived there." The painter clapped his hands, and the entrance to the cave opened. The painter remarked that the cave was very splendid from inside, and he offered the king to show the way. But king did not enter, so the painter entered inside the cave himself. As he entered, the door of the cave closed. Emperor was shocked, astonished, and before he could move or speak a word, the painting had vanished from the wall, and not a sign of Wu Daoji's brush was there. Means entire painting got wiped away. The artist was never seen again. Actually, this was his last painting. So children, such stories play an important part in China's classical education. The books of Confucius and Zhuangzi are full of them. They help the master to guide his disciple in the right direction. Beyond the anecdote, they are deeply revealing of the spirit in which art was considered. Now contrast this story or another famous one about a painter who wouldn't draw the eye of a dragon he had painted for. He feared that it would fly out of the painting. Now the author is comparing the Chinese story with an old story from my native Flanders that I find most representative of Western painting. So children, another story the author has told here about a painter who would not draw the eye of a dragon because he feared that it would fly in the sky. And such stories, children, are part of ancient and classical Chinese tradition. And the books of Confucius and Zhuangzi. Let me tell you, Confucius and Zhuangzi are the well-known philosophers of China. Like we have Gautam Buddha, Mahavir, Sankaracharya. So like them, Confucius and Zhuangzi were also great philosophers. So the books they had written contains these kind of stories only. And these help the master to guide his disciple in the right direction. So these stories help the gurus, rishis, to guide their disciples in the right direction. And these stories reveal the spirit of art, that how it was considered. So I think clearly you can also point out that at that time art was considered as something like magic. The writer then compares these stories to an old story from his own country, Flanders. That is, now he is going to discuss about Western painting. In 15th century Antwerp, a master blacksmith called Quentin Matses fell in love with a painter's daughter. The father would not accept a son-in-law in such a profession, so Quentin sneaked into the painter's studio and painted a fly on his latest panel. With such delicate realism did the master try to swat it away before he realized what had happened. Quentin was immediately admitted as an apprentice into his studio. He married his beloved and went on to become one of the most famous painters of his age. These two stories illustrate what each form of art is trying to achieve: a perfect illusionistic likeness in Europe, the essence of inner life and spirit in Asia. The children's second story is about in the 15th century, later than the story, Chinese story, which was there in the 8th century. So Antwerp, a place is there in Flanders. A blacksmith was there whose name was Quentin Matsys, and he fell in love with a painter's daughter. But the father of the girl would not accept a son-in-law to be in such a profession, because Quentin was a blacksmith working with iron, and the father of the girl was a painter, a renowned person, so he would not accept the boy to be in that profession. So one day Quentin secretly entered into the studio of the painter. Sneaked means secretly. And he painted a fly on his latest painting. So Quentin painted a fly on one of the latest painting of the painter or the girl's father. And it was painted with so delicate realism, the painter took it for a real one. It means next day when the painter came to check the painting, he tried to hit the fly. And after some time he realized the matter, what it was. He was shocked first and then later on impressed by Quentin. And he took him as an apprentice. Apprentice actually, children, a person, suppose if a person wants to gain experience of any work, maybe in a company or somewhere other, so that person works free of cost at that company. Maybe that company could give him some kind of stipend or honorarium, means little bit money, but that is not called as salary. And or maybe the person could work for free. Now that thing is known as apprentice. So Quentin was taken as apprentice, and then Quentin married his beloved, and he went on to become one of the most famous painter of his age. So although Quentin was a blacksmith, but he was talented enough that he painted the painting. So children, the above two stories from China and Flanders illustrate that what each form of art is trying to achieve. One story is about Chinese painting and another is about Western painting. The painting of Europe or the Western painting tries to achieve the aim, that is illusionistic likeness. I told you illusion. I gave example of illusion. Yes. So fly actually appeared real, but it was not real. It was illusion. It appeared similar to any part of the painting. But in Chinese painting, it stresses on inner life and spirit. Spirits, you know very well, ghosts, like creatures. So Chinese painting just talks about magic. In the Chinese story, the emperor commissions a painting and appreciates its outer appearance, but the artist reveals to him the true meaning of his work. The emperor may rule over the territory he has conquered, but only the artist knows the way within. Let me show the way, the Tao, a word that means both the path or the method, and the mysterious works of the universe. The painting is gone, but the artist has reached his goal beyond any material appearance. The children, the painter of China, that is Wu Daozi, showed the emperor Xuanzong his painting, but the emperor just overlooked the inner beauty of the painting. He just praised the outer beauty, but the painter showed him the real meaning of his painting when he entered the cave and got disappeared. Thereby the painter achieved his goal. A classical Chinese landscape is not meant to reproduce any actual view, as would a Western figurative painting. Whereas the European painter wants you to borrow his eyes and look at a particular landscape exactly as you saw it, from a specific angle. The Chinese painter does not choose a single viewpoint. His landscape is not a real one, and you can enter it from any point, then travel in it. The artist creates a path for your eyes to travel up and down, then back again in a leisurely movement. This is even more true in the case of the horizontal scroll, in which the action of slowly opening one section of the painting, then rolling it up to move on to the other side, adds a dimension of time which is unknown in any other form of painting. It also requires the active participation of the viewer, who decides at what pace he will travel through the painting, a participation which is physical as well as mental. The Chinese painter does not want you to borrow his eyes, he wants you to enter his mind. The landscape is an inner one, a spiritual and conceptual. Now, children, the author tries to differentiate between the Western painting and the Chinese painting. Or exactly, in fact, the author wants to discuss the viewpoint of both the painters. Means, what did they think? What did the Chinese painter think and what did the Western painter think? Or actually, what did they want from the spectators who would see their painting? So, children, a Western painting reproduces an actual view. See, like painting of a fly. So, it represents an actual view. The European painter wants the beholders to look at a particular landscape from a specific angle, exactly as he saw it. Means the European painters wants that you see the painting from his eyes and look the painting from a specific angle which the painter wants. But the Chinese painter does not choose a single viewpoint, because his landscape is not a real one, as the painter of Chinese painting got disappeared inside the cave. So his painting was not a real, and after that, painting got disappeared from the wall. So you can enter into the painting of a Chinese painter from anywhere. The artist creates a path for your eyes to travel up and down and back again in a leisurely movement. This is more true in the case of horizontal scroll. Here one slowly opens one section of the painting, then rolls it up and moves on to the other. This adds a dimension of time. It also requires the active participation of the viewer, a participation which is physical as well as mental. The European painter wants the viewers to borrow his eyes. The Chinese painter does not want him. He wants the viewer to enter his mind. Right? The Chinese painter wants the viewer to enter his mind, because his landscape is not real, it is inside, it is inner one, spiritual and conceptual. This concept is expressed as Sensui, literally mountain water, which used together represent the word landscape more than two elements of an image. These represent two complementary poles reflecting the Taoist view of the universe. The mountain is yang, reaching vertically towards heaven, stable, warm and dry in the sun, while the water is yin, the horizontal and resting on the earth, fluid, moist and cool. The interaction of yin, the receptive feminine aspect of universal energy, and its counterpart yang, active and masculine, is of course a fundamental notion of Taoism. What is often overlooked is an essential third element, that is the middle void, where their interaction takes place. This can be compared with the yogic practice of pranayama: breathe in, retain, breathe out. The suspension of breath is the void where meditation occurs. The middle void is essential. Nothing can happen without it. Hence, the importance of the white, unpainted space in Chinese landscape. So, children, this concept which we have just studied about Chinese painting is known as Sensui, which literally actually means mountain water. And these together are used in the landscape. The mountain is known as yang, while the water is known as yin. And the interaction of yin and yang is a fundamental belief in Taoism. So Taoism is a philosophy, okay, and those who are Taoists, they follow this philosophy. They believe that yin and yang react together, they interact together, but yang as it is mountain and yin it is the water, but there exists one third element in between both of them, and that third element is known as middle void. Void, I think you might have said, it means emptiness, empty. Let us relate it with something else, that is pranayam. So in pranayam, what you do? You sit in your asana, that is Kamalasana or Siddhasana, and then in yogic mudra, that is Dhyan mudra, you just close your eyes, then you take deep breath, and then you hold the breath, and after some time you breathe out. So this suspension of breath means by the time you hold your breath is the void or emptiness where the meditation occurs. And this middle void is essential. Nothing can happen without it. Hence the white unpainted space in the Chinese landscape is very important. This is also when man finds a fundamental role in that space between heaven and earth. He becomes a conduit of communication between both poles of the universe. His presence is essential, even if it's only suggested, far from being lost or oppressed by the lofty peaks. He is, in Francis Cheng's wonderful expression, the eye of the landscape. So children, now within this heaven and earth exist the human beings, and he finds his importance in this middle void. So the presence of human being is very essential. Alright children, so now I think we had discussed these two kind of paintings and the differences in between them. Now let's discuss about one more kind of painting which is totally different from these two kind of paintings. The person who started this thing was known as Jean Dubuffet. He was a French painter and he mooted the concept of art brut in the 1940s. The art of the untrained visionary was of minority interest. From its almost veiled beginnings, outsider art has gradually become the fastest growing area of interest in contemporary art internationally. This genre is described as the art of those who have no right to be the artists, as they have received no formal training, yet they show talent and artistic insight. Their works are a stimulating contrast to a lot of mainstream offerings. Around the time Dubuffet was propounding his concept in India, an untutored genius was creating paradise. Years ago, the little patch of jungle that he began clearing to make himself a garden sculpted with stone and recycled material is known to the world today as the Rock Garden at Chandigarh. Its 80-year-old creative director Nek Chand is now hailed as India's biggest contributor to outsider art. The 50th issue, spring 2005 of Raw Vision, a UK-based magazine pioneer in outsider art publications, features Nek Chand and his Rock Garden sculpture, that is Women by the Waterfall, on its anniversary issue's cover. The notion of art brut or raw art was of works that were in their raw state as regards culture and artistic influences. Anything and everything from a tin to a sink to a broken down car could be material for a work of art. Something Nek Chand has taken to dizzying heights Recognizing his art as an outstanding testimony of the difference a single man can make when he lives his dream. The Swiss Commission for UNESCO will be off honoring him by way of a European exposition of his works. The 5-month interactive show, Realm of Nature, beginning October, will be held at leading museums in Switzerland, Belgium, France, and Italy. The biggest reward is walking through the garden and seeing people enjoy my creation, Nekchand says. So, children, I'm talking about a new kind of art which is known as art brut. Alright, which is known as art brut or raw art. Actually, this concept was started by Jean Dubuffet in the 1940. And art brut actually means outsider art. And the artists of this outsider art, they are not actually artists because they had not received any formal training and they don't deserve to be artists. But clearly, they portray something which is very beautiful. As you can see this picture, a rock garden. Children, I think most of you might have visited Chandigarh, and if you have visited Chandigarh, I can't believe that you have not visited the rock garden because it is the most famous place in Chandigarh. So here I am talking about rock garden, and it was designed by Nekchand. So Nekchand kind of persons are known for their art brut or outsider art. So actually Jean Dubuffet started this concept of outsider art, but Nekchand in India followed on his footsteps and made himself an untutored genius. So he is now 80 years old and his contribution is there in the outsider art. He has made Chandigarh's rock garden with stone and recycling material like bangles, like that. And to the world it is known as rock garden at Chandigarh. And the recently released 50th scene that is of spring 2005, the magazine Raw Vision, which is actually a UK based magazine, he published about the work of Nekchand and his rock garden by the name Women by the Waterfall on its anniversary issues cover. So means Nekchand's rock garden got depicted in this magazine. His art has been recognized as an outstanding testimony. Testimony means truth of the difference a single man can make when he lives his dream. So actually Nekchand had lived his dream. He converted, or you can say, jungle into a very popular place. The Swiss Commission for UNESCO will be honoring him by way of a 5-month interactive show of his works. The Swiss Commission had decided that they will organize his show where his work would get displayed. Nekchand says that walking through the garden and watching people enjoy his creation is the biggest reward for him. So Nekchand gets excited and he says that when the people visit my garden and they praise my work, it is the biggest and the best reward for me. So children, that's all in this chapter. Let's summarize. In this chapter we discussed about classical Chinese painting and Western painting, the differences in between them, and at last we discussed about outsider art. Actually children, outsider painting if you will make on canvas. It will be inside a room. But outsider art means the art which does not require any boundary. is created outside the walls of the building. Alright, so we discussed outside and out, and especially the work of Nekchand, who created the rock garden. So children, that's all in this chapter. Hope you understand. For any queries, please contact me. Thank you.